What's going on, everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new AYANEO Pocket EVO. Now, at the time of making this video, I've only had this for about 24 hours. I've been doing a lot of testing with it, and I do like what AYANEO has done with this device. This has been one that I've kind of been excited about given the chipset and screen they're using here, because when it comes down to it, what we've got is a 7-inch OLED up to 165 Hz. It supports HDR up to 800 nits of brightness, and the screen on this thing is absolutely beautiful. The one that I have here is the retro power version, so we've got that retro styling going on, but keep in mind you can pick up a white or a black one over on their website, and we've seen this form factor from AYANEO before, but with an x86 CPU. This is basically the same shell they were using with the AYANEO 2S, so we know it's really comfortable. But we haven't quite seen a display like this from AYANEO until now, and I do think they've done a bang-up job with this one. Super deep blacks, very vibrant colors, up to 800 nits of brightness, and right now I've only got it at 40% brightness because it does kind of get on up there. Round back, not much going on, but we do have an intake vent for the active cooling system here. And up top, it does have a 3.5mm audio jack, volume rocker, and a fingerprint/power button. And when it comes to ergonomics, I do think that this is one of the most comfortable handhelds on the market. Fits right in your palm, you can reach all of the buttons. We do have Hall-based full-size analog sticks up here. And around back, we've got Hall-based triggers with quite a lot of throw. Again, the shell here is basically the same thing as the AYANEO 2S, and they did put a lot of work into the ergonomics. But this is much lighter than the 2S ever was. And as for the D-pad, it's just one of those that really does kind of make you want to play some fighting games. Really good roll, and I've always been a big fan of these D-pads on their devices. I love the button feel here from the face buttons up to the shoulder buttons. There are some programmable buttons that we can actually just map through software up top here also. But first and foremost, this is not an x86 device, so we're not going to be running Windows on this. This is actually running Android 13 out of the box, and for the CPU, we've got that Snapdragon G3 Gen 2. This will do up to a 15-watt TDP, enabling some really great performance. It's an 8-core ARM SoC, and those big cores go up to 3.36 GHz. The GPU is the Adreno A32, up to 1000 MHz, and we've seen this in 2 of their other devices they've released, so we've already got a good idea of what kind of performance we can expect out of this. And you can get this with up to 24 GB of RAM and 1 TB of internal storage, but all of them do support a micro SD card. This one has that 7-inch, 165 Hz frameless OLED, and having the frameless design here really does make all of the difference. Just looking around it, I mean, there's no border whatsoever. It's got a resolution of 1920 by 1080 up to 800 nits of brightness, 150% sRGB, so we got that oversaturation, which is something I love seeing here, 110% DCI-P3. We've got Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 5.3, an 8600 mAh battery. It weighs 478 grams, and it's running Android 13 out of the box. What we're looking at right now is not the stock launcher. This is actually known as Console Launcher, one of my favorites. But if we head in here, we do have ISpace, which is customizable. We can add our apps up top here. Personally, I like having that third-party launcher installed. I just think it looks really good. But AYANEO has given us a lot of great software with this device to allow us to fully customize basically everything on here, from the RGB around the analog sticks. We can totally remap each button on this unit. We can control the performance of the CPU and GPU, full fan control, and I will move in a bit closer in just a bit so we can take a look at the software because there's quite a bit to go over. But again, this is an Android device. It's not an x86 device running Windows or Linux. We've got Android, and with that, we do have a lot of different emulators, a lot of games that we can play. We can always stream. If you want to do it locally, use something like Moonlight, Steam Link, or if you want to do it from the cloud, Xbox Cloud Gaming, GeForce Now, all of that's going to work great on this device. But the main thing you need to know going into a device like this is it's not a Windows handheld. It's an Android handheld at the end of the day. Now, one cool thing about these devices is we do have our performance switch up top, and there are a few different profiles that are preset, ready to go. So we've got kind of a balanced mode, there's a streaming mode, there's a gaming mode, and then you can go max. That's going to be full out. That fan's going to come on, but it's going to allow that G3 Gen 2 to clock up to its maximum clocks on the CPU and GPU, enabling as much performance as possible out of this ARM-based chip. I'm sure you've noticed the RGB on this device, and it is fully customizable from software. So at any given time, we can bring up our overlay, and we're just going to go to our custom mode. So yeah, we've got a couple different presets here. Rainbow, chasing, you can cycle through all of the colors of the rainbow if you wanted to, but personally I like setting it to a custom solid color on each of these analog sticks. Since the Pocket Evo supports video over USB Type-C, I figured I'd just go ahead and plug this in so we could get a better look at everything. And to my surprise, you can actually do up to 4K 60 with this unit. I've also got a mouse plugged in for easy navigation. And when we head down to our AYA settings, first option here, account. If you've got an AYANEO account, you can go ahead and log in right here and your library data will sync. Screenshots also. Performance, now this is really important for this device. With the G3X Gen 2, we've got a few settings that we can use here. Saving, balanced, streaming, game, and of course we've got max right here. But throughout, we've got custom presets for the fan, CPU scheduler, saving, balanced, performance, and we can actually set the CPU limit on the big and the little cores here. Plus, there's a GPU limit, which I thought was pretty cool. In game mode right now, maximum limit is going to be 615 megahertz, but this GPU will clock up to 1000. Keep that in mind. Obviously, max mode is just going to max everything out here, but it's really nice that we can tweak and tune each one of these cores and the GPU directly on this device. Controller, got our lighting effect, controller calibration. I didn't have to do this, but it's pretty easy to set up. Controller style, AYANEO or Xbox. Keyboard and mouse mode. This is great because we've got a hotkey, and once we press that hotkey, we can actually use the analog sticks as an on-screen mouse. So to make it pretty easy to navigate if you don't want to use that touch screen. Device settings, got a root script, device spoofing, screen settings. This will do up to 165 Hz, and in between we've got 60, 90, 120, 144, and 165. Over HDMI or USB Type-C out, with what I've got right now, I've only seen up to 60, but that's throughout, so even up to 4K 60. Color mode, I've got it set to vibrant, AYANEO brightness. Now I did disable this over HDMI because it was a bit dim. Actually, I'll show you. Once I disable it, we've got that maximum brightness over HDMI. Fan settings, we've got a full curve that we can adjust here, so you can set up a custom curve on that fan. And I will tell you, max does get pretty loud here, but it's going to keep it nice and cool. Screencasting settings, display settings, show on both handheld and external display. Out of the box, once you plug this into a USB to HDMI adapter, it's only going to show on that external. I've got it set up to show on both screens. Resolution, 720 by 400, up to 4K 60. So I thought that was really cool. Usually we kind of max out at like 1080. So if you are working with a much higher resolution display, this does look really good over on a larger screen. Personalized, we've got that system wallpaper, general Android settings, update. This does support OTA updates, and we've got updates directly through iSpace for different applications directly from AYANEO. And we've got our About section. So this is the one with 24 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of internal storage. Definitely overkill, but this thing's been working great so far. Now, along with all of this, if we press the AYA button, it's going to bring up our overlay. So performance, we can swap between streaming, game, max mode right here. We've also got full fan control directly from the overlay. Performance overlay, I personally use this quite a bit with native Android games. Gives us the FPS, CPU usage, temperature, GPU usage, and temp over there, plus our RAM usage. So yeah, you might see this a lot while we're gaming, but it's really nice to have at least that FPS counter to know if we're running these games at full speed or not. Also got a detailed section. This is the most in-depth performance overlay that I've seen on Android. I mean, it even gives us the screen brightness. It's pretty crazy. Refresh rate, again, 165 down to 60. Controller, vibration, we can totally disable it. Violent, it's just going to really shake this thing up. Those haptics in this thing are really great. And speaking of haptics, this does support sound tap magic. Basically, it's going to kind of transfer sound over to the haptics here, give you a little bit of feedback. Key vibration, analog trigger, joysticks. We can calibrate all of this directly from the overlay here. From handheld section, we've got all of our basic Android settings from Bluetooth, airplane mode, volume, brightness, widget, and they have added a lot of widgets here. So this is basically just like our pull down menu on Android, but we've got it integrated here with iSpace. Of course, we've got our settings, update options. handheld settings. When it comes to overall performance of that G3X Gen 2, I mean, any game on the Android App Store, you're going to be able to play at full speed. You can max most of them out, but there is one drawback here with a game like Fortnite. So this isn't whitelisted. So in order to get up to 60 FPS, you will have to spoof your device. There's a built-in spoofing app that you can use, but just out of the box, if you got into this game, 30 FPS medium settings. And we've got more than enough power to run it like this. And if you really wanted to, you could spoof this, tell it that it's a Galaxy S24 Ultra, and get that 120 Hz out of it. But this is more of an Epic thing rather than an AYANEO thing. They kind of pick and choose what manufacturers get those higher settings. Next thing I wanted to do was test out this D-pad, and we've seen something very similar on the AYANEO 2S. This one does feel a little looser. I mean, it's not bad at all. I actually kind of like the way this one feels. But I've never been a big fan of the rounded corners on these D-pads. Now it kind of makes you play from the middle of the pad itself, which it works perfectly like that. But I kind of like playing on the edges, you know, having a square D-pad. This is something I had to get used to, but you know, just kind of swapping between the middle and the edges. You can see that when I'm in the middle, I can pull these moves off perfectly fine. But trying to go over on the edge like I would with a normal longer D-pad, kind of miss a few here and there. But it's something I could definitely get used to. Another thing we have here from AYANEO is a built-in key mapper. So a game like Genshin Impact on Android, we just don't have controller support yet. I mean, it's been years. They gave it over to iOS, and I guess they probably make more money over there, but it would be nice to have real controller support. Either way, AYANEO's kind of remedied this with the on-screen key mapper. I didn't turn the opacity down on these. I just kind of wanted to show you where they were on screen. You can set it to 0 so you'd never see these again. And by the way, I'm using an Xbox controller connected over Bluetooth, but it works with basically any controller, built-in or external. And the G3X Gen 2 is going to run Genshin Impact at the highest settings, 60 FPS. So for native Android games, the chipset they used here definitely has you covered, but my favorite thing to do on these devices is emulation. And I wanted to show off some Dolphin and PS too. So here we have the Dolphin emulator. I'm at 3x resolution, Automodalista, one of my favorite games. It's a bit demanding on these ARM chips, and when you're using a Snapdragon chip, best practice for most games is to use OpenGL, but there are a few exceptions, and I did run into one of them. Something like the Wii version of Sonic Colors running in the same emulator, in my experience, does function better using the Vulkan backend. So here it is, Sonic Colors, Dolphin emulator, 3x resolution, but instead of using OpenGL, I'm using the Vulkan backend. And this is one of those games that natively ran at 30 FPS. And throughout my testing with the G3X Gen 2 and the Pocket S and the Pocket DMG, I've had a really good time with GameCube and Wii emulation using the Dolphin emulator. It's a pretty powerful chip here. Another thing I wanted to take a look at running in this video was some PS2 emulation. I'm using the Neether SX2 emulator, OpenGL backend, 2x resolution. So across the board with the G3X Gen 2, depending on the game, 2x up to 5x depending on what you're playing. Something like God of War 2, I did have to drop it down to 2x. With Gran Turismo 4 here, we can take it up, but with this OLED display only coming in at 1080p, 2x is right there at that threshold, and these games look amazing on this OLED. So far, in the time I've spent with the new Pocket Evo, I've been really enjoying it. I love the screen, ergonomics are great, battery life is awesome, and that's something I really need to test. We've got an 8600 milliamp hour battery, and when I first got this around 28 hours ago, as of making this video, I fully charged it, and it hasn't died yet, but I haven't been maxing that CPU out completely. So I kind of want to get an idea of battery life with some lighter Android games, emulation, and even streaming. But so far, runtime seems really good with that 8600 milliamp hour battery. So I will have at least one more video coming up. Need to spend a couple more days with this. I've got a few devices that I've been going back and forth between, so it might be 4 to 6 days. But if there's anything else you want to see in my full review, let me know in the comments below. I will be testing more native Android games, some streaming. Obviously, we'll get that battery life out of the way. And I also want to test out the WinLater application and see how well it runs PC games. But that's going to wrap it up for my first look video at the AYANEO Pocket EVO. If you're interested in learning a little more about this device, I will leave links in the description. And like always, Thanks for watching.